that table, if y'all are alright. He'll be right here, so he'll be pretty close. Awesome. Thank you.
Check, check. Check, check.
I'm going to put Christie's mom. Captain left.
Do you want me to just hold on to it in the front? Okay.
Make sure that they're all set up. If you don't change it, they're all set up to go. Now, remember that, because if anybody unless they change it, like mine changed.
Check, check.
I started to see if I can change it that. Then it's like you can't yeah, no, but then you start to have the task on.
Excuse me? Can she get water? Water? Yes, she does. When's governor's next appointment? How long is it going to be?
He's filing.
Yeah, so it needs time to get him there.
At noon, exactly.
Product, please.
No. Cold Spring. Do you want this water? All right. You gotta turn them down. Are they gonna turn them down?
Turn off only when they're speaking.
Right. Oh, they're on. Sorry. They're on. One's on. Yeah, they're on. Test.
The one in the middle.
It's on.
Check, 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 check. No, it's not.
Test. Test.
Check, check, check.
How's everyone doing this morning? I woke you up, didn't I? Coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jeff Chittis. The show on 96.7 The Wave. Works. How are we doing back there? Nice line of sight. So how you feeling? Good. You guys ready to do your job? What is our job here in New Hampshire? Live free or die. Live free or die and pick the next president of the United States, isn't it? I like both those jobs. We'll put that right in our description. That's our job. New Hampshire does it better than anyone else. We ask the hard questions that the media doesn't want to bother with. We vet these candidates and we make sure that they're prepared for the road after New Hampshire. All the other states should thank us, shouldn't they? Because we groom these presidents, we listen to these presidents, but the key for us is this: no BS. Right, New Hampshire? We can tell if you're going to give us a staged answer. We can tell when an operative whispers in your ear the answer you should give. And those candidates start falling away, don't they? The man we're going to hear today, who's going to be introduced to you by the former mayor of Somersworth, doesn't give BS answers. How many of you saw the video this week on the heroin epidemic? Raise your hand if you've seen that. That's a man with passion. That's a man who believes what he is talking about. And that's a man who's not scripted. And New Hampshire pays attention to things like that. And it's very important that today, standing room only, that we make sure that the rest of the nation knows that we're going to make sure we pick the right person for President of the United States. Now, to introduce you to our special guest, should be no stranger to many of you. He served as mayor in Somersworth, did an absolutely fantastic job. He's been a strong veterans advocate throughout this state. When you hear live free or die, and when you hear sacrifice above all else, this gentleman represents that. We should all be proud, whether we live in Somersworth or whether we live in other communities in New Hampshire, to have a person like this working with us to help us. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a nice big round of applause to the former mayor of Somersworth, Matt Spencer.
Thank you, Jeff, very much. And thank you all for coming here to the city of Somersworth and to Kelley's Row. I'd like to say thank you for Councilor Witham for being here, Councilor Marty Dumont, and anybody else I missed, any dignitaries. Thank you for coming. I wanted Governor Christie here so everybody could see him and talk to him and let them know why I have endorsed him. Governor Christie stands for a lot of things that I believe in as well. And one of the things is we really have a drug problem, and it's an addiction problem. And we both have had lost friends due to that. And Governor Christie's passion for that is above none else. And that's why in other issues that I stand with Governor Christie. So I'd like to introduce him. Give a warm welcome to Governor Christie.
All right. Good morning, good morning. I am really glad you're here, and I am happy to be here too. Happy to be back in New Hampshire. I was here yesterday, I'm here today, I'm here tomorrow. I will be here so much that you people will grow tired of me by the time we get to February 9th. I'm really excited about what's been happening in the campaign in the last couple of weeks. You know, you start off in a campaign and folks say, you know, come to New Hampshire, work hard, get to know people, and good things will happen. And, you know, if you know your history, you know that what they're telling you is true. But today is day 45 for me in New Hampshire, much more than any other candidate has been here. And, you know, when you're in day like 28, 29, 30, and you're still not necessarily feeling, you know, exactly what people tell you you're going to feel when you've been here for a while, you start to say to yourself, is history going to be on its head this time? But it's not. In the last 2 weeks, we have felt such great momentum here in New Hampshire, more people coming out to listen, more people signing up to support. And I think it's because people are starting to understand that our problems in this country are serious, but our opportunities are great. And we need somebody who's going to be willing to confront both. And so I want to talk to you quickly about two things and then get the rest of the time to your questions. The first is to talk about this addiction problem. Now, you know, this is something that I've been talking about for 20 years. 20 years ago, I was a county elected official in New Jersey in my very first position. I took a hiatus from politics for a while after that, for a long while after that first 3 years. And by the way, my retirement from county elected politics was involuntary. So I decided, you know, I wasn't going to do it for much longer. But I went ahead and did this, and I went on the board of an adolescent drug treatment facility in New Jersey called Daytop Village. And it struck me in a way that little else has ever struck me in my life in terms of boards or groups that I've been involved with. A great guy who I just heard from last night, in fact, Father Joe Hennon, was the guy who started that organization. He's a Catholic priest who's now retired to Hawaii because he's suffering from leukemia. And he called me, emailed me rather, last night, and one of the things he said in the email was, "I trained you well." He taught me 20 years ago that addiction was a disease, and it was a disease that could be treated, and that it wasn't a moral failing. It was a disease. And he said to me, "You're going to want to come to Daytop Village and just sit and watch these young men and women go through their treatment because it's one of the most special places on earth." And I said, "Why is that, Father Joe?" And he said, "It's a place where you can watch miracles happen." And I went there, and he was right. Young men and women who came in addicted to heroin, PCP, cocaine, at the absolute bottom, lifeless eyes, parents, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, in some instances, just distraught, usually brought there from jail. And you thought to yourself, how could this possibly become a good situation? I'll tell you one story about one young man who I met there. He had come in as a heroin addict. He had progressed from spending his own money to stealing money from his mother to then doing minor breaking and enterings to get money to buy his heroin. He had been in jail a couple of times, and finally, the third time he went in jail, he went before a judge, and the judge said to him, "Listen, you're either going to state prison or you're going to Daytop Village." And he said he'd rather go to state prison. And the judge said, "Well, too bad. I think you're going to Daytop Village." And the judge sent him to Daytop Village. He went through the program, and it's, by the way, a year-long, intensive inpatient program. And Father Hennon had the foresight to not only have a treatment facility there, but he raised the money to build a school there because he wanted these young men and women not to fall behind on their education. And he built a school there, so they were going to school at the same time they were getting treatment, but they were going to school with others who were going through the same thing they were going through. So this young man got his high school diploma from the Daytop Village School. He wound up then going to Rutgers University and received his bachelor's degree. And when I met him, I was the United States Attorney for New Jersey, and he was a law student at Cardozo Law School in New York City. And I knew his story, and he came up to me after I gave a speech at Daytop as U.S. Attorney, and he said to me, "I just want to tell you, you know, Mr. Christie, you've been inspiring to me." And I kind of shook my head and I said, "You're the inspiration, man, not me. I said, and here's what I want you to do. What are you doing this summer? And he said, well, I'm looking for a summer job. You know, he was in his second year of law school. And I said, you're going to come and work for me. So you're going to come in the United States Attorney's Office. He goes, well, you know I have a record. And I said, yeah, I'm well aware you have a record. I said, are you committing crimes currently? And he said, no, sir. And I said, good. That'll do. You come and work for me. We have a big internship program in the U.S. Attorney's Office. It's very competitive to get into. Lots of folks want to do it because it's a hands-on thing. And at the end of your summer internship, there's a moot court, which you do in front of a federal judge in a federal courtroom. And he was the lead attorney for the defense. And he won the case, and he got the Outstanding Intern Award that summer. That young man is now graduated from law school. Was in private practice at a big firm in New York City, and I'm not shocked to have watched him then work a number of years there and then decide he wanted to do his own thing. He went out and started his own law firm in New York City, and he's a criminal defense lawyer now in New York City. And that young man, when I first met him, was just dragged in from the floor of the county lockup, addicted to heroin, and saying he'd rather go to state prison than go to get help. That taught me two things. One, we have to make treatment mandatory. They're never ready. They're never ready. There's always an excuse. There's always a reason. There's always some misunderstanding on our part. We need to make treatment mandatory, and that's what we've done in New Jersey. If you're a first-time, non-dealing, non-violent drug offender, you no longer go to prison in New Jersey. You go to mandatory inpatient treatment. And the reason I had that idea, and when you're governor, the great thing about this job is you could take your ideas and your experience and put it into law, is because of that young man. He would not be doing what he's doing today if that judge didn't look at him and say, no, 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 you're not going to state prison, you're going to treatment. Turned his life around. The second thing it taught me was that Father Hennon was right. Treatment is a place where miracles can happen. It doesn't always happen. And we're not going to save every life, but miracles can happen. And we have an obligation now in this country. I had someone last night say to me, well, what about interdicting drugs at the border? I said, of course. Of course we should be doing everything we can to interdict drugs at the border. But the war on drugs by arresting people for the last 30 years has been a failure. It's well-intentioned. It started off well-intentioned, and the people who participated in it are well-intentioned, and I'm one of them. As a prosecutor, I've participated in it. But we need to do much more than that. We need to treat people for a disease, and we need to acknowledge it as that. And I will tell you this, as President of the United States, I will speak frequently behind that presidential seal to try to remove the stigma from treating our husbands and wives, our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters for the scourge of this addiction. It is one of the most important things we can do. And I will tell you that I'm completely shocked by the reaction to that video. We were driving in here this morning from the hotel. It is now up to 6.4 million hits. When I went to bed last night at 11:30, it was 6 million. So between 11:30 Eastern time last night and 8 o'clock Eastern time this morning, another 400,000 people watched that video. The fact is that tells you more than any poll. It tells you more than any focus group. The American people are concerned about their husbands, their wives, their brothers, their sisters, their sons, and their daughters. And we got to do everything we can to stop the killing and the loss of the value of life in our country. And the way to do that is to give people the opportunity for treatment. We won't save every life, but every life we save is a blessing. And that's what we have to do. And as president, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So for law enforcement here in New Hampshire who are battling this every day, and for the drug treatment counselors who are working hard every day in this state and pushing uphill right now against this awful addiction in your state, Help is on the way. Help is on the way. And I'm not talking about the way the federal government normally does it. Just, send some money and hope for the best. I'm going to be a soldier on the front lines of this fight. And the commander-in-chief should be that. Because if you're pro-life like I am, well then you got to be pro-life for the whole life. Not just when they're in the womb. That's the easy part. The much harder part is when they come out. That's when they can disappoint us, As parents of 4, we know that, right? So we've got to work together to make sure that we treat every life as a precious gift from God, because it is. It is. Before I take your questions, I want to let you know that I have not come up here unarmed. I want you to know that I have brought with me reinforcements from the great state of New Jersey. My wife of 29 years, my best friend, and the person that most people actually want to see when I come to New Hampshire. The First Lady of New Jersey, my wife Mary Pat, is here this morning. I'll finish up before your questions with a quick story. Mary Pat and I were here in New Hampshire a few months ago. Together, we were staying at one of the local hotels. We came downstairs in the morning, and the manager of the hotel came over to say, "Thank you, Governor, for picking our hotel, and hope you continue to stay here, and was your stay okay?" and all the rest. And he saw Mary Pat kind of walking away to go and get some coffee at the little shop they had inside of the hotel lobby. And I said, "Thank you," and we shook hands, and then I stayed there. I didn't walk away. And he stood and kind of looked at me for a couple minutes, and he came back to me and he said, "Governor, I want to tell you something. I think it's really wonderful," he said, "that you stay here and wait to walk your young aide out to the car." Knowing how quickly rumors start, I said, "She's not my young aide. She's my wife, I swear." And so she likes that story. But I told her that the deal is, I'll tell the story at town hall meetings when you're here. But in return, when I get to work and start answering questions, you have to act like my young aide and hold my jacket for me. She says she thinks that's a good trade, so we're going to take off our jacket and get to work. Thank you. Thank you, young aide. All right, who's got questions? Let's go. Raise them up. Yes, sir.
Also a Jersey boy, Governor. I grew up in Ventnor, New Jersey.
Ventnor, beautiful.
Yeah,
The
Ventnor, New
Jersey Shore.
But for the 34 years just before I retired, I worked just north of here in a public school district. And many of the students come from low-income families. Many of the parents work at minimum wage jobs. The minimum wage in New Hampshire is something around $7.25, less than $15,000 a year. These are not just entry-level workers. These are full-time workers, not McDonald's workers. What are your views about raising the minimum wage? Even Social Security, now and then, not this year, gets a COLA.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure. Listen, we've had this argument and discussion in New Jersey. First off, I don't think this should be a federal issue. I think it should be a state-by-state issue, because cost of living and other things are different from state to state. In New Jersey, the argument that I had with folks was they wanted to raise the minimum wage $1.50 in one fell swoop. And I said to them, I think that's too much for small business to absorb in one fell swoop. So my suggestion to them was, let's raise it $1.50, but let's phase it in over 3 years. So do 50 cents, 50 cents, 50 cents, 3 years in a row. The Democrats in my legislature rejected that. And I rejected a $1.50 raise at one time. So what they did was, we have a ability in our state to amend our Constitution that the governor has nothing to do with. The legislature passes a constitutional amendment, it goes right on the ballot to the people vote yes or no. What the Democrats in the legislature did was they raised it, they put on the ballot to raise it $1.50 and to put a COLA attached to it, to say that minimum wage should go up every year based upon inflation rate. The voters voted for it in New Jersey, and that's now in our Constitution. Kind of crazy to be in the Constitution, but that's what the Democrats did. I believe in a higher minimum wage. I just want to do it in a way that's responsible. I want to do it in a way that doesn't hurt and kill jobs while we're going about it. And I think if you give business people an ability to plan and a reasonable increase in the wage, they can. That's why I don't like the COLA thing, because you don't know how to plan for that. And so for me, I think if you made incremental increases to the minimum wage in a smart way, I have no objection to that. My objection is when you try to do headline things. One fell swoop, because people will lose their jobs for that. Some small businesses, when you add on the cost of regulation that's going now, and even the Obama administration, their small business administration says the cost of now complying with federal regulation for small business in this country is $10,000 per employee. And so, you know, we've got to lower that. I'd rather lower that and lower regulations and let some of that $10,000 go to either hiring new people or increasing the wages of the people already working. We've got this backwards here. So I have no philosophical objection to the increase of the minimum wage. Let's just do it in a way that's smart and that saves jobs and enhances opportunity rather than loses jobs and puts some people in a better position, but a lot of other people in a significantly worse position. So that's the way I wanted to deal with it in New Jersey. I lost. But the fact is, I think as president, I would want to deal with it in the same way, but let the states do it. Because I think each state has a different standard of living, different cost of living. Costs different to live up here in New Hampshire than it does to live in New Jersey, certainly than it does to live in Wyoming. And let's let each state make those determinations.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity, Governor. I'm Dr. Randall Heller, and I wrote the pharmacology curriculum for the Department of Defense. So I have quite a bit of book smarts when it comes to addressing the heroin epidemic. And I don't particularly think it's a productive approach to focus on addiction as a disease. And I say that because I feel that doing so victimizes the addict, perhaps raises their self-esteem, certainly garners some votes for the politician. I think the approach to resolving the heroin epidemic is twofold. That is to discover the source, cut off that source, and I think it has to do with porous borders. But secondly, we need to hold the dealer accountable. And notice that I'm focusing on the word dealer here. In the city that I reside in, and I'm not referring to Somersworth, we, for example, apprehend the petty, cheap dealer off the street, process them, release them the next day on personal recognizance to continue to ply their trade. And that is simply wrong. The dealer must be held accountable to bring this crisis to an end. Thank you.
I only disagree with one thing that you said. So let me start backwards with what I agree with, and I'll work to what I disagree with. One, I will take a backseat to no one in terms of tough enforcement of the law. I, for 7 years, was the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. We prosecuted significant record numbers of drug and gun crime related to drug dealing. And I'm proud of the record that we have there. And you're absolutely right. That's why when I talked about the program we have in New Jersey for diverting people to treatment, I said you have to be nonviolent and non-dealing. Nonviolent and non-dealing. Because the dealer is spreading that poison throughout our neighborhoods. They need to be sent to jail and to be held responsible for what they're doing, as do the folks who commit violent acts in support of the drug trade or for any other reason. So I agree with you that we have to hold dealers responsible, and they should not be out on personal recognizance bonds, in my view. And I'll tell you something else. One of the things when I was doing the criminal justice reform in New Jersey, under our Constitution, until recently, bail was mandatory. Bail was mandatory unless you were judged to be a risk of flight. A state judge in New Jersey could not consider your previous criminal record in determining whether or not you could get bail or not get bail. This was crazy to me. I came from the federal system where you can consider, and in fact have to consider, someone's past criminal record as to whether they should be bailed at all, let alone personal recognizance, given any bail. So one of the deals I made with the Democrats, and this is important about the way I would operate in Washington, Democrats wanted certain things in criminal justice reform, like for nonviolent offenders, a lowering of bail so that they wouldn't essentially be in debtor's prison for minor petty offenses. I said, okay, I'd give you that, but in return, I want to change to the Constitution that allows judges to take previous criminal record into account whether to grant bail or not. I got the NAACP and the ACLU to support me on that. And now in New Jersey, state judges can take into account exactly what you're talking about. What is the risk that, based on your previous record, that you're going to go back out if I give you bail and commit exactly the same crime again? If I think that's a significant problem, I'm going to keep you in pending trial. That keeps those dealers off the street. It keeps violent folks off the street. makes the witnesses to the crime safer and ready to be able to go to trial rather than have the guy come back out and intimidate witnesses and make us lose cases, or worse, murder witnesses who would otherwise be able to testify and send them to jail. So I take a backseat to no one on your approach, okay? I absolutely believe that that's what we need to do. The only thing I would disagree with you on, because I've watched it over and over again, and we could just have an honest disagreement on this, is that I do think that for many people, they take drugs, it's a bad choice. It's an awfully bad choice to try it the first time. But I would suggest to all of you in this room that I am sure there are choices and decisions you have made in your life that when you look back, you wish you could take them back. I know I have. And I assume that most of you have made some bad decisions in your life too that you look back and go, wow, got away with that one. That's good. Thank you. All right? If you do it with drugs and you have an addictive personality, you can't take that judgment back. You become addicted. And so I'm not looking to raise the self-esteem of anyone for the mere purpose of raising their self-esteem. And I'm certainly not looking to do it to get votes, because when I first started to talk about this was not popular. You know, my view on this about treatment was running in the face of just say no. Well, hell, that's what we practice in our house. In our house with our 4 kids, it's just say no. But if they happen to say yes, God forbid, then I got to be ready to deal with what the ramifications of that are too. And what I don't want is people hiding in the shadows on this. And that's part of the problem too. The stigma that we attach to this, and that's part of what I talk about in the video. I tell those 2 stories together about my mother and her addiction to cigarettes, and my friend who became addicted to prescription painkillers. Because when my mom got sick, inevitably, from lung cancer, after smoking from the time she was 16 until she was diagnosed on Valentine's Day of 2004 when she was 71 years old. She started smoking in 1948 and continued smoking until 2004 when she was diagnosed with lung cancer. Nobody at that time, because we've progressed in our view of cancer and all the rest, socially, no one said to me, listen, don't give her any treatment. She didn't deserve it. She knew. She knew what she was doing. And that was her choice. It's a moral failing on her part. Don't treat her. No chemotherapy, no radiation, nothing. Just let her die. No one says that. And so my point of what I'm trying to accomplish here is not to elevate anyone and not to raise self-esteem for the sake of raising self-esteem, but I'm trying to save lives. And when people make these bad choices and they have an addictive personality and they become addicted, and we know this runs in families too. We know there's a genetic element to this. We see alcoholism for both genetic and social reasons follow in families. We see drug addiction often follow in families. I want those families to begin to talk about this. I want them to talk about the fact that this runs in your family. Be careful, you're extra vulnerable to this. I want to get this out of the shadows, and I don't want parents to feel like the reason this has happened is purely because it's a moral failing of a parent. Because that's not always the case. Sometimes, sure, but not all the time. So my effort in this regard is not about raising self-esteem. It's certainly not about getting votes. If it turns out that it gets me something, that's great. That's my business. So I want to get votes. I'm certainly not here to say, hey, I hope you like me, but if you vote for me, fine. If you don't, no problem. No. I'm going to be really clear with you on this, okay? I am here to get your vote, all right? That's what I'm here for. I'm here to get your vote. But the other thing you'll learn about me is I'm not going to tell you what I think you want to hear, and I'm not just going to agree with you for the sake of agreeing with you if I disagree. Because I think in the end, you should get no surprises when I'm president. You should know, hey, this is where he is. And I tell folks all the time when I come to these town hall meetings, if you're looking for the candidate you agree with 100% of the time, I got a suggestion for you. Go home and look in the mirror. You're it. You're it. You're the only person you agree with 100% of the time. And I tell you, if you insist that a candidate agree with you 100% of the time in order to get your vote, here's what you're going to get: a liar. That's what you're going to get. Because I'll look in your eyes, and I'm pretty good at this now. I've been doing it for a fairly long time. I'll look in your eyes. I'll try to figure out what it is you want to hear. And then I'll tell you what you want to hear. and then I'll pray to God that you forget what I told you when I go into office and I don't do it. You don't want those kind of people anymore. You don't want them, right? You want people who are going to give it to you up front. So thank you. Thank you for raising the issue, and thank you for giving me the chance to clarify where I stand on that. Yes, how about this young man right here? He's, no, you sit down there, young man. The young man behind you, I'll get to you in a moment. Now there's self-esteem, baby, right there. There is self-esteem. We got a perfect example of it. You'll be next, young man. I'm gonna go to the slightly younger guy first. Yes, sir.
Will you be doing anything about the underpaid salary bill of our educators?
Underpaid salary of our educators. Well, I think that depends on where you are. I can tell you in New Jersey, our educators are far from underpaid. Okay, we have very well-paid educators in New Jersey. In fact, not only their salary, but our educators in New Jersey, how about this? The average teacher in New Jersey who works 30 years puts $162,000 into his health insurance and his pension, total, over 30 years. Do you know how much the teacher gets out in benefit from that? $2.4 million. $162,000 in, $2.4 million out, which is why we have a pension deficit in New Jersey. Educators in my state are paid pretty well, not only in terms of their day-to-day salary, but also in terms of benefits that if I offered to any of you here today who I assume don't have that deal, if I offered you that deal, 162 grand in over 30 years and 2.4 million out on the back end, show of hands, who takes it? Damn right, okay? Yeah, even the guy who asked the question, he's gonna take that deal too, right? So I think here's the balance we have to strike, okay? I want to attract more good people to teaching. It's really important. I want you to have the best teachers you possibly have in the front of your classroom. It's really important to do that, but we can't bankrupt our country in the process or any particular state. So we have to find a balance of fairness in how we do it. If there are in particular states where teachers are underpaid, then we should pay them for the value of what they provide every day, and we want them to provide great value to you, because when I get old, I'm counting on you to run this country, right? To go to work every day, to pay your taxes, to be a success, to raise a good family, to buy a home, and do all those things. And you're not going to be able to do all those things as well as you possibly can unless we teach you really well in the years that you're there. So we agree on that. I would tell you, though, that in many instances, when you look at the whole package, lots of educators in lots of states are very well paid. But I know that that varies from state to state in the country, depending upon where you live. But I will tell you, if you want to be a really well-compensated teacher, come to New Jersey, because you'll do pretty darn well. Now to the young man in front of the young man.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome, sir. Here you go.
One of the things that I would like to ask you about is your willingness to commit to, when you sign a law into effect, that it will affect every American, including not accepting the people who passed the law themselves.
Yeah, man, this is a real, yep. This is a real sticking point for me, and I'm glad that you agree. My legislature, through the Constitution, has placed term limits on me as governor. I'm fine with that, okay? But you know what? There's no term limits on my legislature. So what they're saying is the governor is dispensable, they are indispensable. I mean, I have a guy in my legislature who has now served in the legislature for 42 years. Okay, here's the deal, man. Go home, all right? Go home. I mean, if you haven't accomplished everything you need to accomplish in 42 years, then you still need to go home, because you've obviously been dreadfully inefficient. Term limits is something that we should have on legislatures and on the Congress. If you can't accomplish what you need to accomplish in 12 years in Congress, enough. 2 terms in the Senate, 6 terms in the House. Go home. We have a professional political class now that runs things, and that's when you get those kind of things. That Obamacare applies to everybody else, but not to them, right? All these different laws that apply to everyone else but don't apply to Congress or your state legislature when they do that kind of thing. It's wrong, And it undercuts Americans' confidence in their leadership. And so you're right. I am willing to commit to saying to them, these laws don't apply to you. You're not getting my signature. And then we'll go back to the drawing board. And that's really important to do. All right. Go to the young lady at the table.
Hello, I'd like to tell you first I am a proud Sicilian.
There you go.
Hey, they do exist in New Hampshire. It's not all French here. My question is a little bit different. Currently in the United States, 1 in 3 people are a victim of domestic violence. A study showed that in New Jersey in 2013, a domestic violence situation happened every 7 minutes. With that being said, New Jersey is also one of the very few states that do not allow stun guns as a non-lethal form of protection. So my question really is, what is your position on keeping people safe in America within their own walls? I'm not worried about domestic violence, terrorists coming abroad. How are you going to keep women safe from domestic violence situations within our own walls?
Well, let me tell you, it's a real challenge in our state because we have a state legislature that is very anti-Second Amendment and as a result, anti any type of weapon. And I've been fighting against that for my entire time as governor. I'll tell you one of the things I did to try to help folks who are in domestic violence situations, even within the constrictions of our state, which is we are not a shall issue state for carry permits. We are a may issue state. You have to go to a judge. You've got to go through police and a judge. And even then, the standard is extraordinarily high to get a permit to carry in our state. It is a very difficult state in that regard. What I've done, though, is recently in response to a domestic violence incident where a woman had a restraining order against her former boyfriend. And she then went to apply for a permit to have a handgun in her home. Now, under the law in New Jersey, she's supposed to get a determination on that within 30 days from when she does it. That, to me, is too long, but the story gets worse because it didn't even get done within 30 days. It took much longer than that. And what happened? Yes, she was killed. Her ex-boyfriend, under the restraining order, came back to the home with a knife and killed her. So I've now changed the regulations to say that when someone who has gotten a restraining order as a victim of domestic violence, that their permit must go right to the top and must be acted on immediately. Now, it still has to be judged by the same standards that are in the law in New Jersey, which I can't change by executive fiat. Only the legislature can change. And my legislature only seems interested in passing new gun laws that make it harder for innocent, law-abiding people to have guns, and that have absolutely nothing to do with stopping criminals from having guns. And every one of those laws that they've passed, I've vetoed. Because my view is we don't need to keep guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. We should be focusing on taking guns out of the hands of people who break the law. Because guess what? They don't go for background checks. Okay? They don't. They buy guns on the black market, on the streets. They commit a crime with them, they dump them, and they move on. So we're trying, in the limited window I have to operate with a legislature that's very hostile to this kind of thing, to be able to give people a better opportunity to protect themselves. But there's no question that across this country, domestic violence is a huge issue. And we need to start to make a determination as a society as to how we deal with not just the underlying problems, which will take a much longer time to solve, but how we keep people alive. And we need to give men and women who are the victims of domestic violence an option to be able to protect themselves. And so we're doing that a bit in New Jersey in response to this latest incident. And I haven't gotten a lot of pushback from the legislature on that regulatory change because they know what happened. And they don't want to be acting towards women in our state as if that woman and her life didn't matter. It did matter. And we've made those changes, and I have a group right now studying other changes we can make to help people in the same circumstance and recommend those to the legislature and see what they're willing to do. But thanks for raising the issue because it is a really important issue. Yes, sir, in the back.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank you for that video about your mother and relative to drug addiction. What's not being talked about a lot is prescription drugs and how that is really impacting drug addiction from a different demographic than street drugs. My question is about minimum wage, though. What is your argument? Right.
Wow, like a whiplash there.
Yeah.
All right. I love New Hampshire. They keep you on your toes, baby. All right, go ahead.
I have a lot to
Minimum
say.
wage.
So,
Yep.
what is your argument when we have a $7.25 an hour minimum wage, and people who work full time are living off the system. They can't afford health insurance, so they're living on Medicaid, and they're accessing public services that are costing the taxpayer a lot of money. And if minimum wage is raised to a sustainable wage on an annual basis, they would not live off those government services any longer. Plus, the fact that the infusion into the economy would be significant. So what's your argument against that?
Except where's the infusion coming from? I mean, if a business person doesn't have the money to pay for the higher minimum wage, they're going to terminate the person. The problem that you're really getting at is that we have an anemic economy that this past quarter grew at 1.5%, and the money's not there. The money's not there in the private economy, and especially with small business owners. So, theoretically, I understand what you're saying, and if we had economic growth at 3.5% or 4%, I might be more inclined towards your argument. But in the economic growth that we have right now, in this worst recovery from a recession since World War II, this is part of the problem. This is why I'm talking about tax simplification and regulatory simplification to get economic growth back up to 3.5%, 4%. In that instance, I agree with you, because businesses will be much more flush with cash. There'll be much more activity. And then you could make that argument. Right now, the problem is that because of the way this president has run this economy, a central kind of running from Washington, D.C., where they make all the decisions, the fact is that what it's done is place more burdens on small business, made the economy grow much slower than it would have otherwise, and puts us in a position where folks are accessing the governmental economy. But understand, that's what the president wants. This is not by accident. He wants an economy where people are dependent upon the government. And I absolutely believe that. He believes the government can take care of you better than you can take care of yourself. I don't see the evidence of that. As somebody who's in government, I don't see it. And I think most things Washington touches don't turn out very well. So I think we can get to a point that you're talking about, but I think the market can help us get to that point. But we got to get greater economic growth. We can't make it happen artificially. If your income, your revenue rather, as a business, has grown at 1.5%, but we're going to raise wages 25%. Well, the fact is that the business owner's going to have to say, all right, if I'm required to raise the wages 25%, I will, but instead of 20 people working in my business, we're going to have 10. Because I can afford to pay those 10 the 25% higher wages, but I can't afford to pay 20 that. I don't want us to be put in that position. In greater economic growth, we're going to have an opportunity to have rising wages. But let's remember something. Forget about minimum wage. Middle class wages have been stagnant for 15 years. And so we've got a much bigger problem that is driven by economic growth. We had a small period of fairly good economic growth right at the beginning of the Bush presidency that was stopped by, and at the end of the Clinton presidency, that was stopped by 9/11. And really since that time, we have not had really robust economic growth. And so we need to get back to simplifying the tax code, simplifying regulation, paring back this government and its expense, getting rid of Obamacare, doing the things that we need to do to be able to let small businesses like this one breathe. I can't tell you how many small business owners I've spoken to who would like to expand their business, but they realize they're getting near the Obamacare ceiling of the number of employees when they have to start doing that stuff, and they don't hire. Because I'm not going to deal with this stuff. And if they don't have to, or they go to just making their employees independent contractors. I mean, people are finding, what the president doesn't understand is that the ingenuity of the American people is much greater than the ingenuity of government. Much better. Much better. And I'd rather have an economy where we're not looking for ways to work around things, but where we're all pushing in the same direction and not having to react to every new regulation that comes out of Washington. And so that's why I have my view on that. I don't want to put people out of work. And I think a significant increase like that without the concurrent economic growth that goes along with it, an increase in revenue to small businesses, is going to turn out to be a problem. And minimum wage is not something that they're worried about, at our major corporations. We're talking, that's a small business situation, not a major corporation situation. Yes, sir.
One final question on minimum wage.
Sure.
I'm 71. I started working for 85 cents an hour, which was the minimum wage. But the only people paid minimum wage were kids. When you make minimum wage $7.75, there's an awful lot of kids that do not get jobs. And I don't know why we don't two-tier or do something so that more and more young people can learn how to work.
Yep. Well, that's one of the problems, right? I mean, you raise a really good issue that I wish I would have raised because, I was in the same situation when I first started working as a teenager. I worked at a shoe store, worked at a gas station. I didn't make minimum wage in those places. They paid me what they were going to pay me, but I got to learn the value of work. I went to after school every day, went early in the morning to work at that gas station on the weekends, and after school to the shoe store. And then my big bonus when I worked for the shoe store was he used to go out to a flea market at Roosevelt Raceway in Roosevelt, Long Island on the weekends, on the Sunday, when his store was closed. He'd pick me up outside at the end of my driveway at 5 a.m. 5 a.m. on Sunday. And I'd sit in the back. He had a chair for me and his two sons in the back of a boxcar. And we rode from New Jersey to Long Island. Not a great ride under any circumstances, even not at 5 o'clock in the morning, bouncing up and down in the back of this boxcar, surrounded by sneakers. Boxes and boxes of sneakers. And my big bonus was he'd pay me in cash. On Sunday, I'd get, a couple of 20s for having gone to Roosevelt Raceway all day. And I remember coming back after like the second or third time I did it. And I said to my parents, I don't know that that's really enough money for me to because then we'd come back to New Jersey and we'd have to unload the entire truck back into the store and then eventually get home. So I'd get home in time for dinner from like 5 o'clock in the morning. And my father looked at me and said, not enough money? Really? And then that was the end of the conversation. And I was back on the back of the boxcar the next Sunday. There's a value in that. Not just the dollars, but there's an intrinsic value. And this is part of the thing that I don't think the president talks about enough, and we don't talk about enough in this country, about the inherent value of work. Not just the dollars that it gives you, but what it does for your soul. That you get up every day and you're going someplace where your labor is paid for and as a result honored, where you feel like you're accomplishing something, and you have something to talk to your family about when you come home at night. There's a value to that. There's an inherent intrinsic value to the work. And I think we need to go back to a work-based society. Do you know that in this administration, there have been months where more people have signed up for Social Security disability insurance than have gotten a job? And that's why Social Security disability insurance is on the road to bankruptcy. Because we have more people on it today than we've ever had in our history. And I believe this president encourages that kind of conduct. I really do. Yes, ma'am.
I know, let me have my mic first. I recently spent 4 days in an emergency room with a 15-year-old girl who was desperate for some sort of recovery help from an opiate addiction. While I think every person deserves and needs recovery, what's the plan to pay for, 4 days?
Well, let me say a few things. Let me tell you what we're doing in New Jersey. One of the interesting things since we've begun this adventure in the last couple of years is that our prison population in New Jersey is down 10%. And I think we're pretty close to the point in our state, our prison population is dropping rapidly enough and consistently enough that we're going to be able to close a state prison. Now, imagine that. I don't think you're going to find another state in America that's going to say we're getting ready to close a state prison. How does that answer your question? I'm taking the money from the corrections budget and I'm putting it into the human services budget to be able to start to deal with some of the demand, but we're still well behind the demand. We need to get the private sector incentivized, and part of this is going to have to be demanding more of our insurance companies, because a lot of these folks have private pay insurance, but the private pay insurance doesn't cover the type of recovery services that are being offered And then families are in the position where they can't afford to pay it out of pocket. And so we're going to have to work with the insurance companies to demand more of them. That's part of the answer. Part of the answer is lowering our corrections budgets where appropriate and putting that money into human services budgets to incentivize more addiction services providers to come into your state. But it's going to take us years to get where we need to be. But that's why I'm talking about it, because we need to focus on it. It's not going to happen overnight. I know you all are having a special legislative session. I read in one of the newspapers. They're coming in next week or in 2 weeks to talk about what to do about the epidemic. You know, that's a good thing. We should be talking about it and should be acting on it. We've acted on it a lot in New Jersey. I'm going to talk about it even more come, our new legislative session that'll start in January. There's more for us to do. But we also need to understand it will take some time because it has suffered from benign neglect for a long time. And you don't go from benign neglect to nirvana overnight. It takes a while. But I think if leaders are talking about it and citizens are concerned about it, then even legislators will have to move on it. And I think that's where we need to get to. But it's going to take a while. It will. Yes, sir.
Can you just expand on the results you had in New Jersey from keeping the violent offenders and drug dealers, in prison longer until trial, and what that's done? I mean, you talk about closing a prison, but you're holding these guys longer.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
just
because we're
expand on
taking a
that
lot of the
bit.
non-violent, non-dealing offenders out, and we're putting them into treatment. And a lot of them who are on small petty crimes were staying in jail for a lot longer because there was a minimum $5,000 bail with a $500 cash alternative. Well, if you're a poor person in New Jersey, you don't have $500 in cash. So a lot of those folks were winding up spending their time in jail, more time waiting for trial than they would have gotten if they were found guilty of their offense immediately.
How about keeping the violent guys there longer? Like, what's that done for you?
Well, what it does for New Jersey is that prosecutors are telling me that it's helping them to build their cases. The biggest problem, there are two big problems with letting violent offenders out on bail. Problem number one is that they go out and commit more violent acts because they're violent sociopaths, and it makes every neighborhood less safe. Second problem is a practical one from a prosecutor's perspective, and it's witness intimidation. That these folks know that the only way they're going to be convicted is if the witnesses to their crime are going to come forward. And they go back, and then all of a sudden prosecutors tell me these witnesses disappear. Or they have amnesia. They say, I know I told you it was that way, but now when I think about it, I don't really remember it that way. Because they've got this guy or woman back out on the street intimidating them, telling you show up in that courtroom, I'm going to get out at some point, and when I do, I'm coming to look for you first. That doesn't happen when you keep them in jail pending their trial, and then they get tried and convicted, and then they go to state prison for a good long time. And so what we're seeing is that prosecutors are saying that we're seeing much less witness retraction, and we're seeing that we're not having these repeat offenders coming over and over again while they're on bail to be able to commit these crimes. On the flip side, with the people that we're letting out, we've now increased our jail population's percentages to nearly 60% of all the people that we have in prison are violent criminals. That's really good. That's about 10% up from where we were when we started on the overall jail population. That means we're lowering the number of nonviolence, we're increasing the number of violence. That's what jail is for, in my mind, is to separate the sociopaths from society. And that's got to be our first priority. And so we're seeing really good results from it. But it'll tell you, if I'm in a position now to perhaps close a state prison, it'll tell you how many nonviolent people we were housing. And remember this, everybody, when you compare addiction treatment to incarceration, in New Jersey at least, I don't know what the prices are in New Hampshire, but in New Jersey, the cost of giving someone a full year of inpatient drug treatment is $24,000 a year. The cost of incarcerating them in a state prison for a full year is $49,000. So, I'm happy to pay the $49,000 for the violent sociopath. That's money well spent. But for the non-violent, non-dealing drug offender, I can get them treatment that may in fact stick and save $25,000 a head a year. That's efficiency that government almost never sees. And, we should continue to try to do that. So those are the kind of results that we're seeing so far. Sir.
Yeah, my question's about health care. I want to follow up on what this woman over here spoke to. You spoke passionately about addiction as disease that needs treatment, and I appreciate that. And treatment really implicates health care. And what I'm wondering is whether there's a good bit of dissatisfaction with Obamacare and with the role of the federal government in health care. When you talk about treating drug addicts, you're adding to the healthcare system. You're adding to the burden on the healthcare system. Does the federal government, in your opinion, have a role in healthcare at all?
Listen, the federal government is going to continue to have a role in healthcare in two programs in particular, in Medicare and Medicaid. All right, so these are entrenched programs that I'm not suggesting we get rid of. I have suggestions in my entitlement reform plan that I put out about how to make Medicare and Medicaid more efficient and more effective. But so just through those two programs alone, which are huge programs, as you know, the federal government's going to have a role in healthcare. I don't think we need to make their role bigger. And what Obamacare does is to put the current federal healthcare role on steroids. My suggestion on Obamacare is this. I think we need to repeal Obamacare and we need to replace it with a state-based system. And here's why. The challenges that you face here in New Hampshire on cost and access to health care are significantly different than the ones we face in New Jersey, just based upon our demographics. Our states are similarly sized from a geographic perspective, landmass perspective. Yet, you have about 1.3 million people here in New Hampshire. In about the same amount of land, we have 8.9 million people in New Jersey. We're the most densely populated state in the country. Many of the problems in New Hampshire healthcare on access is about distance. You know, people in different parts of the state having to go significant distances to access the type of specialty care that they may need to be able to get the care they need to help them. In New Jersey, I got to tell you, we trip over a hospital like every 4 miles. They're everywhere. Our problem for access is not distance, it's cost. The cost of living is much more expensive in New Jersey than it is here in New Hampshire, as I hear from lots of New Jerseyans who have moved to New Hampshire when I'm up here. And so for us, I think the challenges we have are much different than yours. So I say, let's let the governor and the state legislature in each state require them to come up with a healthcare system for their state that works best for their state. The reason I think this is really important is that the closer these decisions are made to you, the greater ability you have to impact them. So if they're being made in Washington, D.C. in Health and Human Services, forget it. You have a complaint, a concern about something that's particular to New Hampshire, and you're writing to the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, forget it. You know you're not going to get a response. You're not going to get any satisfaction. Same way we trip over hospitals in New Jersey, you all trip over state reps. Right? I mean, seriously, right? Yeah, like 400 of these folks, right? I mean, every time I go into another town hall meeting, it's like, this is state representative, state representative, state representative, former state representative, state representative, state representative. I mean, like, at half time, it's like 2/3 of the audience are either current or former state reps, right? Now, here's the thing, though. What it does for a state like New Hampshire is you can have a much more direct effect on what's going on because you have access to these folks on a regular basis, and a lot of them. And so if there are problems, you're going to see them here at Kelley's. You're going to see them at the dry cleaners. You're going to see them at the local deli. You're going to see them at the local diner. And you're going to be able to say to them, hey, you know, I'm a small business owner. This is why it's not working for me, and have an ability to affect change. Second part of the reason why I would do it that way is philosophical. You know, I do believe in the Constitution, as I think most of us in this room would say we do. The 10th Amendment to the Constitution says any powers not specifically given to the federal government in this document revert to the states. I've reviewed the Constitution. There's nothing about health care in the Constitution. And so we need to also say, we need to have some fidelity to the Constitution. Not just because of concept, but because it works. And the reason the founders did that, in my view, was because they were concerned about an unreachable, overreaching federal government that would get into things that people would not be able to affect change. So that's the way I would deal with the health care. You're not going to be able to change the federal government's role in Medicare and Medicaid. You can reform it, which I suggest, and go to my website. You'll see the ideas we have for reforming Medicare and Medicaid. But there's still going to be a federal role. Let's not make it bigger. Let's not make it worse. And you see now the president promised that if we did Obamacare, I mean, what are the big lies of the first term? If you like your doctor, you can keep him. If you like your health care plan, you can keep it. And under Obamacare, premiums are going to go down. You lost your doctor, you lost your health plan, and the health plan you're getting is much more expensive. And this year, they're saying on average across the country, it'll go up 7.5%. Remember, a 1% inflation world. A 1% inflation world makes higher education look like a bargain, right? So we see this happening, and we know it's not working. So let's revert it back to the states. And the states don't get an option. They have to do something. But each state will do something different. The way we're going to confront that problem in New Jersey is a heck of a lot different than they're going to confront it in Montana. And it should be. We are the United States of America. We set up this system for a reason. States have their own individual character. You know, you yell and live free or die on the way in here, right? New Hampshire takes great pride in its unique character and its unique approach. Believe me, it's a different kind of unique character and approach, but we take a lot of Jersey pride too in the way we do things. Don't you look like that now? Because I'll have to go Jersey on you, and then all of a sudden it starts to get a little ugly, you know? Everybody, we should not deny the uniqueness that makes this country great, and we should revert this part of the system back to the states to avoid creating another monster at the federal level that we'll never be able to tame then. All right? Thank you. Yes, ma'am, right here. He's coming up behind you with a microphone. There you go. Right behind you.
Thank you. Four former reps at this table.
There you go.
I just couldn't have it.
Excellent.
It's pretty hard to talk to my neighbors about the value and the quality and the inspiration and everything you learn from working for $8 an hour. When we pick up the paper and the CEO of the insurance company is making $22 million, GE's CEO is making $30 million, and the guys on Wall Street, I don't even know what they're making. So how do we address those large companies that are just completely out of sight and whatever?
Well, I tell you this, I don't think we do it by having the government run their companies. And that's essentially what we imply when we say we want to control their salaries. The fact is that all those companies have shareholders and public shareholders that have to pass on, and boards of directors that have to pass on those compensations. The problem, I don't think, is how much they're making, it's how little everyone else is making. And so I look at it differently. You know, I don't want Hillary Clinton deciding how much the CEO of Facebook should make. Now, I saw Facebook's earnings came out yesterday or 2 days ago. 41% increase in their earnings. They now have 1.5 billion unique visitors to Facebook a day. There's a group of folks who have figured out something the public wanted. They developed it, they enhanced it, and they've made it wildly profitable. How much does somebody like that make? I don't know. But their shareholders and their board is going to decide how much someone like that should make. And they're going to get extraordinarily wealthy for being able to provide an idea and to monetize that idea and to perfect it to the point where they're going to make a lot of money. I don't think we want to go back to a country where that's not possible. And you think about that story, that's a kid who starts in his dorm room at Harvard with an idea. And through his hard work and his ingenuity and the hard work and ingenuity of others, they all of a sudden create now one of the great American companies that is keeping us on the edge of technological development. I don't necessarily want all of a sudden now that they've gotten really successful and someone says, well, Mark Zuckerberg's worth whatever he's worth now. After a couple of days ago, probably $45 billion. I don't want Hillary Clinton coming in and saying, by the way, you know what, Mark, I don't think you're really worth that much or you should be paid that much. I think you should be paid $400,000 a year because I think that's more than enough for you. That's not the kind of government I want. I think the problem we have is that as those numbers have been growing, middle-class wages have been stagnant. So you're talking to your neighbor who makes minimum wage, talk to the neighbor on the other side who's got a fairly decent job, but whose salary hasn't increased much, if any, over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. We need to get economic growth in this country that's not restricted just to Wall Street and to the big CEO suites. And part of the problem is, without getting too deep into the weeds, is what the Federal Reserve has done. You know, they keep interest rates at 0 and make easy money. Who does that benefit? It benefits at this point, once we were through the crisis in 2008, it benefits the investor class. Because if you're an investor and you have money and you have access to money, you borrow money at these very cheap rates, you invest it at higher rates, and you make the difference. Well, I'm not doing that, and you're not doing that, and the neighbors certainly making minimum wage isn't doing that. We need to get the Federal Reserve to start remembering again what their job is, which is about money supply and price stability, to be able to make sure that we're not giving the investor class this great break. That's why I want to change the tax system. Because people in the country feel like they have the sense that the tax system is rigged for the rich. And you know why they think that? Because it is. It is. All right? That's why I say get rid of every loophole and deduction except for 2. The home mortgage interest deduction and the charitable contribution deduction. Because you know what? That's what real people use. And by the way, the rich use it too. Let them use it. And then lower everybody's rates to 28% on the high end, 8% on the low end, and 1 rate in the middle. We'll negotiate the rate in the middle. I don't care. The fact is then, everybody's paying the same in taxes, right? Because now what's happening is they have all these different games and deductions and accountants and lawyers, and they wind up paying no taxes or very little in taxes because the system's being gamed. We have to change those things. That can lead to greater economic growth. I think will lead to greater economic growth and will help those folks have their wages rise too. I do not want to take the incentive ever in America out of a person with a great idea and extraordinary work ethic being able to rise from nothing to wealth. That's part of what this country has been all about. And so I want to keep that way. But if we continue to have a system in government that's rigged for those people, from a tax perspective and a regulatory perspective, well, then the folks in the middle who are working every day to try to reach some of those goals are going to feel like they're being held down, and they are. And that's why I think changing the tax system is such an important part of this. It's not only about economic growth, it's also about fairness. And we need to get back to people in the middle class feeling like, you know what? Everybody's paying their fair share. Whatever that fair share is, everyone's paying their fair share. And right now, I don't think they feel that way. And the reason they don't is because not everybody is paying their fair share. So that's the way I would approach it. I understand how hard it is to explain that, but that's our job. We're leaders. You know, we can't just succumb to the polls. We have to change polls. And that means changing attitudes. And sometimes it's complicated, but it's our job to figure out how to take complicated things and put them into understandable language. One of the greatest challenges of public leadership is when you get into these positions like you all have been in, and you get to really understand and know the nitty-gritty of what's going on, how do I translate that to the people that I represent in a way that they're going to understand and appreciate, and that I can then coalesce support for what we need to do to make it better? It's one of the great challenges of it, but it's one of the things I love about trying to do it, because it's fun, and it's hard, but we got to keep trying to do it. So now my staff tells me I can take one more question before I have to go, which means, of course, I will take 2. The reason for that is I want to always remind them who the boss is. You know, it's very, very, very important, because I tell people, you know what running for president is really bad? If any of you, none of you have ever run for president in this room, let me tell you what it's about. It's about having people who are significantly younger than you tell you where you have to go and what you have to do 18 hours a day. That's what running for president is about. All right, our introducer.
So real quick, and I know your staff is great, by the way, great staff. And this is a much different town hall than a Hillary Clinton town hall, isn't it? Real quick, those here who are veterans, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. Governor, you've done a wonderful job on the debate stage. No one is talking about the veterans. They're abused once again. The Democrats blocked a bill 2 weeks ago for accountability for the VA. What, as Commander-in-Chief, would you do for the veterans who've earned these?
Sure. You know why they haven't talked about the veterans on the stage? Because no one's asked, right? And no one's asked. You know, I mean, they're more interested in asking about, you know, whether Donald Trump has the moral authority to be president, and, you know, about Marco Rubio's credit cards, and, you know, that Jeb Bush should be speaking English or Spanish, and, yeah, and fantasy football. I like that one particularly. Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up. It would have been not humble for me to have brought up that the best answer in the last debate was the answer on fantasy football. But here's the thing. We need to do a few things for vets. And for the veterans in this room, and anybody here who's National Guard or Reserve, I want to thank you for your service. You can never thank people enough for what they've done and what they continue to do in serving our military and serving our country. Tell you what I want to do as president, what I have done as governor. As president, first thing is we made a promise to vets. And the promise was we're going to provide you with health care for the rest of your life if you serve in uniform and put your life in harm's way. And we're failing on that promise. So in the Christie administration, the first thing we would do for veterans is to say you go with your veterans card anywhere to any health care provider, any hospital, and you get your health care paid for by the federal government. That's the way it works. But we also have to fix the VA. And what the VA has become is a large hospital system. And with all due respect to the admirals and generals of the world, we don't need another admiral or general to run a hospital system because, quite frankly, they don't know how to do it. So what I would do to reform the VA, first and foremost, is go to the best hospital CEO in the country and say to them, after I'm elected president, your country needs you for the next 2 years. I need you to leave where you are. I need you to come and run the Veterans Administration. And I need you to bring efficiency and effectiveness to the VA hospital system. Because we don't want to scrap the whole VA hospital system. There's a lot of expertise in that system that vets need. And there's a lot of compassion of individual employees there who love vets, believe in them, and want to care for them. And we need to empower those people. So that's what I do on the federal side. Let me tell you, so that you know that I'm serious about this, what we've done on the state side. In New Jersey, one of the programs I'm proudest of that we started is something called Vets for Warriors. And this is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week national hotline that's run out of Rutgers University Hospital in New Jersey for vets who are suffering from mental health issues. And then call this number anytime, 24/7. And not only do they get someone who's on the other end who's trained in mental health issues, but it's a veteran. It's a veteran on the other end of the phone. Because a lot of our vets are reluctant to access mental health treatment. But they're willing to speak to another vet who understands what they're going through, who's lived what they're going through. And we started this program about 4 years ago. This past year, inexplicably, is a partnership with the Department of Defense. Inexplicably, the Department of Defense told us they were no longer going to fund the program. And gave us essentially 3 months, said then it's going to turn off. This is where it helps to work hard with the folks on the other side of the aisle, even if you don't agree with them all the time. Because I went to the leaders of our Democratic legislature, and I said to them, listen, fellas, this program in total costs $3.3 million a year. We're providing it for the whole country. I don't want a vet to pick up that phone and dial it and have the number be disconnected. I said, so I want the people in New Jersey to pay for this program for the whole country. Will you put the $3.3 million in the budget to pay for this? And I have to give credit to both these guys, to Steve Sweeney and Vince Prieto. They didn't hesitate for a second. They looked at me and said, absolutely, Governor, it's what veterans deserve. So in New Jersey, Vets for Warriors continues today, and it continues for any vet anywhere in the country who wants to access it at the cost being paid for by the people of the state of New Jersey. It's because we believe, I believe as governor, and we believe as a people of our state, that that's the least we owe our vets, and that every time a vet commits suicide, that it is a sin that's visited upon the citizens of this country. So we've done that. Second thing is, you know, we have an enormous homelessness problem among vets. And in New Jersey, for the past number of years, before I was governor, we established a homeless facility in the southern part of our state for veterans called Veterans Haven South. In my third year as governor, we had a psychiatric hospital, state psychiatric hospital, which was no longer needed. It was going to close. And a lot of people in the northern part of our state, and a lot of people suggested to me we should sell it. It's on a great piece of property. We probably could have made some money off of it. I said, I got a different idea. We need to have a homeless place for veterans in the northern part of the state as well. And so we have now transformed this psychiatric hospital into Veterans Haven North. And the other deal I made was, on this property, we were renting property to a private drug and alcohol rehabilitation facility. We know that a lot of the homelessness is caused by drug and alcohol addiction. So I went to that facility and I said, I'll have a new deal for you. I will reduce your rent to $1 a year if in return you provide alcohol and drug rehabilitation treatment to every homeless vet who needs it in Veterans Havens North next door. They agreed to the deal. And so now we have a place where vets can go and have a safe place to sleep, a warm meal, and, if they need it, drug and alcohol rehabilitation to get themselves back on their feet and back into being productive members of their families and productive members of society. So when I tell you I'm going to do certain things for vets when I'm president, I hope you take that on faith, but you don't need to. You don't need to take it on faith because I've done it as governor of New Jersey. I care about the veterans of this country. I honor them. My father's one of them. And I want to make sure that they get not only what they were promised, but also what they deserve, which is the respectful, honorable treatment from every citizen of this country for the service that they provided. That's what I do as president. All right, last question to the gentleman in the back.
Thanks, Governor. You're doing it right here in New Hampshire, doing town hall meetings like this. Disappointed that the folks at Fox don't recognize that. Voters should be deciding what candidates emerge from this pack, not network executives.
Thank you.
And good luck with your filing later today. That's
Yes,
an exciting moment.
I don't want to mess that up, you know.
I do got to challenge you a little bit. I thought I just heard you make something of a class warfare argument when you suggested that only investors are benefiting from low interest rates. Plenty of middle-class homeowners benefit from lower mortgage rates, for example, anyone who's refinanced a home. And, investors are investing in our economy and helping grow jobs. Perhaps I misheard you.
No, what I said was they disproportionately benefit. The investor class disproportionately benefits from artificially low interest rates. And here's the other problem about artificially low interest rates at zero still, is we're now down to 1.5% growth. Now, we don't know what's happening. Is that a temporary blip or is that a slide towards recession? And let's say it's a slide towards recession. What are we going to do then to combat that? We can't lower interest rates below zero. So the irresponsible policies of the Fed are doing a couple of things. One, they're taking tools out of the toolbox that we're not going to be able to use if we go into another recession. And two, my point is not class warfare. I'm happy they're investing, and I'm happy the stock market's at 17,800. It's all great for America. But we can't have a disproportionate, and my response to her question was, we need to have some proportionality. I don't think that proportionality should be imposed by government. There are natural market forces that will impose that proportionality. I don't want to restrict anybody for how much they can make and how they make their money. That's their business. As long as they're doing it legally, it's fine by me, however they do it. But the Fed has allowed, through that low interest, yes, you and I benefit from lower mortgage interest rates, as does anybody else who has a home. But that's a rather limited benefit. A good one for us, an important one. But it's a limited benefit compared to what you can do if you're part of an investor class that has access to significant capital and can make essentially the VIG between those artificially low interest rates and what the investment returns are going to be. So it's not a class warfare argument, it's a proportionality argument, and it's not something that I want to impose a solution on. You didn't hear me say we shouldn't let them do it, they shouldn't make that much money. In fact, my argument to her, I think, was the exact opposite. But let the market bear what the market will bear. And right now, when we keep interest rates well below what the market should be doing, we're not allowing the market to operate. You can manipulate the market in two ways, right? You can manipulate it by putting a cap on it, price controls, wage controls, all those things, or you can do it by keeping interest rates artificially low. And it creates a circumstance in the country that we can't sustain. And that's what I'm worried about. Because if we go back into recession at 0% interest rates at the Fed, what are they going to do? When we had that problem in 2008, they were able to drop interest rates down to zero, allow liquidity to flow into the market, and keep our financial institutions and everyday Americans afloat. What are we going to do if we're going into a recession? And that's what I'm concerned about. That's why Fed policy concerns me. That's the underlying problem. But yeah, no, you're not going to find a class warrior here. You know, I want anybody who's got a great idea and extraordinary work ethic to be able to have an unlimited ceiling. And I am not offended in the least that Mark Zuckerberg's worth $40 billion. The only thing I'm offended by is I wish I would have come up with the idea. Right? Isn't it amazing, too, like in America, when certain ideas become incredibly successful, right? And you say to yourself, damn, man, why didn't I think of that? Because it's so, I mean, you think it and you think about what I want our country to continue to be is the country that technology and innovation moves us at a pace that we can't even begin to understand, right? I mean, how about this, right? You think about a decade ago, None of this existed in the way it exists now. Now everybody, and I mean everybody, has one of these. Everybody. I mean, I can tell you because I'm the guy taking pictures with everybody. Everybody now has a camera on them. Everybody has a camera on them. And this technology has now become a part of our lives. We have access to information anywhere we are at any time, except on some of these roads in New Hampshire. On some of them, we got no access. But other than that, you got access to everything, anything you want at any time. I want a country that continues to be that way. We don't know 10 years from now what the replacement of this is going to be. But you know what we know? We're not going to be using this. We're not going to be using this. I remember the first cell phone we ever got was in a bag, right? It was huge. You carried it around and you thought you were the coolest thing in the world, right? Look at it. I've got my phone here. I put this antenna up and at any time I can reach anybody. Right here without any wires or anything, right? We look back at that now, we laugh about it. Like, you carry the bag around, right? We used to do that. I mean, so I want a country that continues to be that way. But if we don't invest in continuing that kind of innovation and technology, and we don't reward the people who do it, who sit in their dorm room and come up with the great idea. If we don't reward those people, you know, I know Mark very well. I don't think that's why he started it. You know, I watched an interview with him that I got sent from 8 years ago when Facebook had just reached 500,000 members. And here's this, at that time, Mark was like 23. This young kid on an interview on CNBC, and he said, well, you know, we're up to 500,000 members, and we're just hoping to create something that's cool. Mission accomplished. You know, and I want more Mark Zuckerbergs in this world. I want more people who are willing to put themselves on the line for what they think is a great idea and that they get great wealth thereafter. Because that's what this country's all about, at least economically. Let me say a couple of things before I go. First is thank you. Thank you for coming to Kelley's at 8 o'clock in the morning. Thank you for your questions, which were really good. And as everyone said off the top, Matt and everybody else, like, you know, you all here play an extraordinary role, and you said it in your question. Like, let me just tell you, here's something I know for sure. No national polls are going to determine who the next president of the United States is going to be. The people who are going to determine who's got a chance to be the next president of the United States are the people in the first in the nation primary in New Hampshire and the people in the first in the nation caucus in Iowa. Those are the people who are going to winnow this field, not any executives in any suite in New York City, and not any pollsters sitting in some strip mall somewhere making phone calls. And so I am here in New Hampshire, and I am here on my 45th day in New Hampshire because you matter. I mean, I'm practical, okay? I'm not saying I'm up here because I love you. I do. But I'm here because you matter. You matter. And you matter not only to me, you matter to the country. And so when I tell people, you know, because local press follows us up here all the time, they report back in New Jersey where I am and what I'm doing. And when Mary Pat and I get back home, people always ask us, like, what's it like to campaign for president in New Hampshire? And I say to folks two things. First thing I say to them is, I'm telling you, I tell people this all the time. I say to them, I know you don't believe this is true. I said, but there will be people that I have met for the third or fourth time who will look at me completely honestly and earnestly and say, Governor, I know this is the fourth time I've met you. You're in my top 3, and I'm going to see you a couple more times, and then I'll make a decision. And I'm telling you, you all don't get it. People in other states are like, what? They've met you how many times? And how many more times they want to meet you before you get out of the top 3 to maybe the top 1? I'm like, yeah, another 2 or 3 times, you know. That's the first thing I tell them. The second thing I tell them is, if you're cynical about democracy in America, come to New Hampshire. Come to New Hampshire, because you won't be cynical anymore. Because I'm telling you, in New Jersey, they wouldn't believe that this large a crowd came out at 8 o'clock in the morning to listen to someone running for president of the United States to try to help make your decision about who you're going to support on February 9th. And it gives you great confidence again in our country because of folks like you. So that's why I say thank you. The last thing I want to tell you is this. You're going to have to make a vote, though, finally. You're going to have to narrow it from 3 at some point, all you people. And how do you pick 3, all of you? I mean, I'm always in somebody's top 3. How do you get it to 3? It's just, and I wonder if the top 3 is always the same, depending upon who you're talking to, but I'm going to believe it is. You got to make a decision by February 9th. Now, I encourage you to go to my website, to go to chrischristie.com. Independent commentators have said we have the most detailed plans for the military, for the intelligence community, for entitlement reform. In fact, we have the only plan for entitlement reform that anyone's presented that'll save $1.2 trillion over the next 10 years, which we need to do. And go and look at all the proposals. They're detailed, and you folks are sophisticated, and you'll read them, and you'll decide whether they're your cup of tea or not. But I'd suggest to you that just going through my white papers is not enough of a basis for you to decide whether I deserve your vote or I don't. You also have to know who I am. And who I am is a product of where I come from, and most importantly, my parents, right? For all of us, we are a product of our mother and father. And I have an Irish father, and I had a Sicilian mother, as that lady implied in her question before. Yes, ma'am. Now, for those of you who understand this phenomenon of an Irish father and a Sicilian mother, let me explain it to you. It means that as the oldest son in that family, I became expert at dispute resolution at a very early age. This was a rather emotional household where expressions of both love and displeasure were made frequently and loudly. My dad is this wonderful, gregarious, 82-year-old Irishman. We live stream all these town hall meetings over the internet, and so I know my dad is watching back home on the Jersey Shore in New Jersey. And I say, good morning, Dad. He'll be watching again when we do another one this afternoon. And if he were here today, and he is threatening, by the way, to come to New Hampshire to campaign. Last week, he went to Virginia. This is the truth. You know, in Virginia, they have a very complicated system to get on the ballot, and you have to get a certain number of signatures in every congressional district. My 82-year-old father got on the bus this week, leading a group of volunteers from New Jersey to collect our signatures. And I got pictures back of my 82-year-old father standing outside a polling place, getting signatures for his son to be on the ballot in Virginia for President of the United States. So he's all in. And if he were here, he's threatening to come and campaign here. Get ready. He'd be staying afterwards. He'd be hugging all of you. He'd be telling you stories that were embarrassing for me from when I was a kid. You'd really enjoy it. He's that kind of guy. Easy smile, easy laugh, and a wonderful guy. I said I had a Sicilian mother. Now, this is what happens in this situation. My dad, this wonderful guy, I've told him for years, in the automobile of life, he was merely a passenger. Mom was the driver. Mom set the rules. Mom was judge, jury, and executioner, and she liked the last part the most. And the number one rule in our house, as established by my mother, was there is no suffering in silence. Now, I think she set this rule for herself. Because whenever she had any problem, she'd be all over it. She'd be complaining to you, telling you, and when you got to be a teenager finally, you finally say, Mom, enough, I get it. I hear you, I get it, stop. And we could push back a little bit. And she'd say, no, Christopher. You're going to hear this now. I need to get it off my chest. There will be no deathbed confessions in this family. You're going to hear it right now. And we did, over and over. I said I had a Sicilian mother because, as you know, for those of you who watched the video that I talked about addiction, my mom passed away in 2004. And she was diagnosed on Valentine's Day of 2004 with lung cancer. And for any of you who've gone through this, you know that sometimes it's a rapid disease and sometimes it's a slow disease. Unfortunately, in my mom's case, it was really rapid. And I was United States Attorney for New Jersey at the time when she was diagnosed. And at the end of April, she got diagnosed on Valentine's Day. At the end of April of that year, I was at the U.S. Attorney's National Conference in San Diego. And my younger brother called me and said, listen, Mom's taking a real turn for the worse. And if you want to see her, the doctors say you need to come home now. So I got on the red-eye flight from San Diego. I flew home, got to the airport, drove to the hospital. And when I got there, she was already getting morphine. Now, you've gone through this in your family, you know that's kind of the last stage. They're trying to manage significant pain and make her comfortable. So she was kind of asleep, so I sat by the bed for a while waiting for her to wake up. And finally she woke up. And it's typical of my mother, right? She hadn't seen me for a week. First thing she said to me is, "What day is it?" I said, "Well, good morning, Mom. How are you?" "I'm good. It's good to be home. Good to see you. I flew from California to see you, and it's Friday." And she said, "What time is it?" And I said, "It's 9:30 in the morning." And she said, "Go to work." And I said to her, "You know, Mom, I flew all the way from California overnight to come and see you. I'm taking the day off. I'm spending the day with you. I'm not going to work today." She looked at me and she said, "Christopher, it is a work day. Go to work." I said, "Listen, what are you afraid not getting your taxpayers' money's worth? Like, I'll make up the time. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to work today." She leaned over and she grabbed my hand and she said, "Christopher, go to work. It's where you belong. There's nothing left unsaid between us." Other than the birth of our 4 children, it was the single most powerful moment in my life. My mother was giving me permission to let her go. And as I sat there taking that in, I thought to myself, she's right. There's nothing left unsaid. She made sure of it. She told us, I can't tell you how many times she said to me, "No deathbed confessions. You're going to hear it now." And so when that moment came, there was nothing left unsaid. Every grievance had been aired. Every joy had been shared. And I knew she loved me. And she knew I loved her. And so I did as I was told. I got up, I kissed her on the forehead. I said, "Okay, Mom, I'm going to work." And she looked at me and she said, "Good boy." And I got up and I left. And a few hours later, she went into a coma. And 3 days later, she died. And it was the last words we ever spoke to each other. And it was an enormous gift. An enormous gift. As her life was to me. She is still, even though she's been gone 11 years, the single largest influence in my life. And as I go through this, I hear her voice every day. Every challenge, every opportunity, I hear her voice urging me to be myself. Be the person I raised you to be. And so here's what you're going to get. You know, when people, now that Donald's in the race, I'm only the second most psychoanalyzed candidate in the race. Which is a little disappointing to me, but still being second is not bad in terms of psychoanalysis. Because when I say things like, "Get the hell off the beach," or "Sit down and shut up," you know, people say, "What is he doing? Why does he say these things? What's going on in his head? Is he angry? Is he upset? What's wrong?" You now know. It's her. Right? It's her. That's what it is. So you don't have to, there's no mystery to it anymore for you. It's her. And so I know if she were still alive today to see this circus that my life's become. I know there'd be lots of things she would say, but 2 things I know for sure. The first thing she would say is, "So, you're running for President of the United States, Mr. Big Shot. I changed your diaper. I know who you are. Don't try to act big with me." My mother would want me to keep my feet on the ground and keep my head on my shoulders. The second thing I know she'd say is, "Okay, if you're going to do this, you're going to ask these people to trust you and to give you the biggest trust they can give to anyone outside their family. Then you better tell them everything. You better let them know everything you think and everything you feel, because in a trusting relationship, Chris, that's what we do." So that's what I'm doing. I'm coming to New Hampshire. I'm telling you exactly what I think and exactly how I feel. And when I become president, you're not going to have to wonder, because you're going to hear what I'm thinking and you're going to see what I'm feeling. And I think after the last 7 years of what we've had, we could use a little of that. We could use a president who's going to say exactly what he thinks and not what the focus group tells him. We could use a president who's going to show you exactly what he feels, not no drama Obama. Not some actor on a stage, but a real person. And so when, you know, when I'm happy, you're going to see it. When I'm unhappy, you're going to see it too. When I'm sad, you're going to see it. When we have great joys in our life, you'll see it. And you're never going to have to wonder, ever, about how hard I'm going to be willing to fight for you as president, because you're going to watch how hard I'm fighting to get there. I want to be president of the United States. I'm not one of these guys who's here today campaigning up in this state who complains about this. Oh, I wish it was different. Oh, I wish it was better. Oh, I wish it's not what I thought it would be. Oh, I'm concerned. Oh, I'm going through self-analysis. I'm entitled to this. No. I want to be president of the United States. I want to be your president. I want to take on these challenges. I want to do this. That's why I'm here. And I'm going to fight as hard as I can to earn your trust and your support, because your vote is not enough. Because as president, if all you have is your vote and not your trust and your support also, you can't be an effective president. But if I get the trifecta, if I get your vote, your trust, and your support, then I got a chance to be a good president. So, as president, I'm not going to make America great again. You know why? Because America's already great. See, here's the difference between me and Donald on this one. He thinks the government and he is going to make America great. What I know is America's already great because of the American people. That's why we're great. Not because of government. Government doesn't make America great. Americans make America great. And so what I'm going to do as president is to give you the opportunity to be you, the same way I'm going to be me, to unleash the greatness that's inside every American and let you run this country. I'll do the stuff I have to do in Washington to keep the train on the rails and to keep it moving in the right direction. But the fuel of American greatness is in each and every one of us. That's what's made us the most unique and different country that history has ever seen. And so I'll end by telling you that I got criticized at a town hall meeting. This is town hall number 31. Town hall number 31 in New Hampshire. Back in the first 4 or 5, I had a gentleman come up to me in New Hampshire, and he said to me, I got a problem with you after the town hall. I'm like, okay, sure. What's the problem? And he said, you forgot something. I said, well, what did I forget? And he said, you didn't ask me for my vote. He said, I was really impressed. I sat here for 2 hours. I loved what you said. I like your ideas. I like your style. I like the way you approach things. He said, you never asked me for my vote. He said, in New Hampshire, young man, you have to ask for the vote. Don't forget that. So I haven't forgotten it since. So there's no ambiguity. I'm asking for your vote. I want your vote on February 9th because you will determine who moves on. And as you said, you will prepare us for what lies ahead. So thanks for helping prepare me. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening this morning. I'll see you again soon.
Okay, let's head over to the door.
Good job, Eddie.
It's over there. We'll get a
It's
picture.
fun.
Nice to see you again.
Hey.
Can I get a picture?
Yeah. Can we get a picture? You got
Someone come and grab it. Oh. Oh, yeah, never mind.
Nice job, man.
Hey.
You gonna be my photographer today?
You got it.
The door, probably. Do you want to? Here, I'm going to start pushing.
It took me 3 tries, but I finally got my ticket. I could kick off voice for some reason.
Excuse me.
Take care.
I'm sorry, sir.
How am I gonna get? Gotta go that way, Matt.